Hello and welcome back to Space Plus. This is going to be somewhat of a stream of consciousness version of what I usually do here, which is I try and script what I'm going to say by way of introducing a guest. But in this episode, I just want to take a moment to pause and recap and kind of wrap things up in a kind of end of season one type of way. It's a little bit like what Voyager 1 did when it was at the end of its mission to visit the outer planets of the solar system and turned around to take that famous photo of the pale blue dot. We wouldn't have had that photo if we hadn't taken a moment to reflect on where we'd been. So, in that spirit, I'd like to look back at the 6 interviews and some of the other activities I've been up to outside of Space Plus, which have shed light on the space sector and really helped me to understand it better, but also unearthed a lot more questions. What on earth is happening in the space sector right now?
Boy, you and me both are wondering.
Conflict, domination, monopoly.
We need our understanding of reality to evolve at the same rate as these advances in technology, as these advances out into space physically. Because otherwise, we are destined to destroy ourselves.
There's a movement from me to we. There is an understanding that we're all in this together.
If for you to build a rocket to take you to Mars, you have to genocide a population to benefit financially, to get the funding, to get the political support that you need. Is that the kind of future that you really want to contribute to?
When you look at the night sky, you use science to explain what's up there. You use art to express how you feel.
The first thing I can definitely state from my experience in the space sector so far is that it's full of really nice people. People that genuinely care about space and genuinely care about trying to do something good. The second thing I'd say is that the sector itself, people had a lot of feelings on the value that it was bringing and the way it was practically operating. There was quite a bit of critique around this, actually.
One of the things that I've seen about the space industry is that it's very insular. There's a lot of arrogance and hubris. They like using their own jargon, and then they like to complain that nobody understands them. People don't understand us. They don't know why space is so awesome. And then when people try to understand, but you have to have 3 PhDs, you have to have gone to this school, and it's very exclusionist.
I mean, it's like an antiquated industry. There's a lot of outdated things. There's a lot of outdated cultures, a lot of outdated norms.
There's something about the fact that the space sector has been around for about 70 years or so, since the kind of mid-50s, really. And in many ways, it hasn't changed a lot, but is currently experiencing quite a lot of change. And there's always going to be a bit of a tension between those two things. There's lots happening to be excited about. Lots of new small commercial companies starting up and doing things that have never been done before, or doing things at a quicker speed or a different scale to how they were done in the past, when it used to all be controlled via purely government agencies. And inevitably, when there's new money coming in and there's new ideas rolling into something, patterns of who's had power and influence are maybe shifting over time, for better or worse. These things can create a bit of tension and bring challenges to the sector. That's maybe something I'll explore in more detail in future episodes here on Space Plus. There's also the hidden side of the space sector, which is the defense element, which it turns out is a pretty major part of the whole thing.
What's unique about the space industry is the fact that it's the space and defense industry, that they're so inherently tied together. And that's because of the history of space exploration, of how it started during the Cold War because of military interests. And it's still funded mostly by military interests.
That's something that I maybe knew a little bit about, but didn't know quite to what extent that was true. So that was really sobering to hear that that is part and parcel of the whole industry. There's probably a lot of ethical questions that one can ask about what the defense sector is up to in space. It's an argument that I don't feel qualified at this stage to really unpack, but I'd like to understand more about it. Understanding whether this is some sort of necessary evil. That's often something that's quoted as like, well, we do need to spend a lot of money on weapons and things like this because the bad guys are doing it too. And that might be true, but does it have to be true? There's more to that to be explored.
The idea that space is going to solve our problems is, I think, a possibly damaging one. It won't. If anything, and anyone who's seen their science fiction movies will know, we're going to take our problems into space if we don't solve them down here. And so it's important that we kind of, I think, perhaps allow ourselves just some time to contemplate. Unfortunately, history reveals that, that's something that humans are kind of uniquely bad at doing.
We're evolved primates. We tend towards conflict. We like to resolve things with a few words and then violence, So I'd love to think that we'll evolve past that, but it's interesting compared to computers and technology and virtually everything else. Humans appear to evolve very slowly, and our sentiments and philosophies and brains appear to evolve pretty slowly. So I would love to see some huge cultural shift appear that says, okay, we are truly this beyond personal profit motivation, all-inclusive, peace, love, and Bobby Sherman society that happened in Star Trek, virtually every iteration of that series in one way or another. But I fear that The Expanse is the more realistic depiction of human nature.
So while there's a lot to be skeptical about, a lot to maybe critique about the current state of the sector, every person I spoke to in this season also had hope for something better. They could also see a way in which space was used to change something about the world and make it better than it currently is. Whether that was using space technology to increase the quality of life for people on Earth, or whether it was about our hopes to explore the wider solar system and eventually the galaxy, whether it was as a source of artistic inspiration to create music and poetry, whether it was almost a source of philosophical understanding. We could have an experience in space that would totally shift our entire perspective on how we understood the Earth and our relationship to it. Everybody had something positive that they could see could come out of a better understanding of space and a better way of using it compared to how we currently do.
I think that the biggest power of space that I see is its power to unite, its power to wake us up, its power to wake us up to who we are, who we are, to where we've come from, to the possibilities of where we're going. Its power to show us deeper layers of what life really is, and I think that our whole culture is in need of a wake-up call around who we actually are. Around how interconnected we are, around how much of a miracle it is to be here. And I think space has the power to bring that awareness to people. And if that awareness were widespread, we would have a different world.
By the way, if you're confused about the apparel, this is the cosmic microwave background radiation image of the entire universe. And all the various fluctuations that can be found in it. And I couldn't decide on what kind of cool space picture I wanted for my new onesie, so I just got a picture of the entire universe instead. If you want one, I'm making some more Space Plus merch. Let me know if you want a cool space-themed onesie as well. Anyway, back to the review. A lot of people are also coming into the sector from other industries, and I met a lot of people in a similar boat to me who had an interest, a curiosity about space, no formal qualification, and are trying a new career. A lot of people moving in from other industries with different experience, bringing that sort of broader perspective to what can be a fairly insular industry by the sounds of it. So I think that's good. The people that work in this sector certainly encourage others to move into it from elsewhere and bring that broader perspective. So anybody that's been interested in what I'm doing, if it's something you're thinking about, well then come with me on this journey. It's not just about people with science degrees. It's not just about wealthy or middle class people. It's not just about people from the global north. It's about everyone's night sky. I'm here in Scotland, so within that, there's also how much of this is particularly going on here. My understanding is quite a lot. And again, we'll unpack that with people from the Scottish space sector in future episodes.
Most people on Earth are still operating out of a nationalistic view. And you can see it. I don't have to give you chapter and verse of the outcome of that, right?
Yeah, of course.
I don't have to explain to you why that's not a good worldview. It produces bad outcomes. So what we hope to do is create a more earthly or earth-oriented worldview.
We also spoke quite a lot about the overview effect. It came up in almost all of the interviews. Everybody in this season is using space in some capacity to try and inspire people, to get them to care about space, about people, about the environment, the fact that we're all basically on a big old organic spaceship hurtling through the galaxy. And the overview effect, it's a definite real phenomenon. It's something that only a handful of people have ever experienced, but it is something that can be brought back down to Earth, and it can be a powerful tool for getting people to care. And bringing a sense of awe about the planet, I think, is actually really valuable. We are all human beings, and we all have the capacity to be awed by something. And probably the overview effect is one of the most unique, rare experiences that we've ever had in the history of our entire species. I mean, a tiny percent of people have had it firsthand. The people that are then motivated to bring that experience back down to Earth are doing interesting things. So I think it's important to keep in mind that there are positives to come from space, to looking up and to thinking about our relationship with the planet. It also is a good counterbalance to the negatives that we've learned about what's going on in space. The fact that it is about to be this new domain of military activity. Not wild about that. The fact that a certain billionaire is basically adding thousands and thousands of small satellites into low Earth orbit with no regulation whatsoever and having all kinds of impacts as a result of that. The fact that we don't really know the full extent of the environmental impact that all this activity could have on the atmosphere, and ultimately that we still really haven't got a good fix on a growing space junk problem. Those are all things to be really concerned about, and I think we need to be louder about our concerns and more clear in our critiques about it, to not hide the fact that it's happening. I think two things can be true at the same time. I don't want to just move into this sector and be a cheerleader, just kind of space washing, to use a term that one of our guests raised before, using space to kind of hide the other blemishes of a company's or organization's activities. That's not what I want to do. I want to ask questions, sometimes difficult questions. I personally would love for it to just be all happy, inspirational. That'd be lovely, you know, and I really think that exploring space, doing the research, sending probes, telescopes, and eventually humans out into our surrounding solar system is really exciting. I really support that. As we've learned from some other interviews, it's a tough time for the exploration side of things. There is a commercial element to all of this. There's a military element to all of this. There's a research element to all of this. I'd like to delve a bit deeper into all of the ways that we are using space and the benefits that brings back to Earth, and we'll get into much more of that in more detail in future episodes. Yeah, and outside of these interviews, I've just gotten to speak to a whole lot more people. I've attended space conferences, I've been on a workshop with other space journalists and writers, meeting people from the industry and understanding what the challenges are and getting some good ideas on how to broaden the message to a wider public that still don't know a great deal about space besides maybe the headlines. And those headlines are sometimes not well written either. There's events that I'd like to continue to host. We had one so far successful Space Plus evening. There's another one coming up in the works fairly soon, but I hope that that will be the first of many more. I think it's great that we've got Substack to connect to other people around the world, people who can leave comments. I'd like to recommend other people that are writing and making videos about space as well. We can all connect online, which is great, but there's something about meeting face to face and having a human connection. Again, we are, on this planet together, and there's something kind of special about gathering and acknowledging that, and using all of our various skills and creative outlets. On the last Space Plus evening, we had excellent musicians. We had brilliant poets. We had people asking really interesting and difficult questions. We got the conversation going. We got people to engage with space in all kinds of ways. Science can be intimidating, so trying to find ways to make it less so is really important. You've obviously heard about the acronym STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and maths. Now, I quite like it when people add an A into that mix to talk about the arts and to think about how the arts actually complement all those other fields, and that, we should be thinking about these things holistically. I've been trying to figure out how to add more letters to that, because as you'll see in the last episode that I made, we spoke a lot about politics, and I think we need to include that in the mix. Unfortunately, P-STEAM doesn't particularly roll off the tongue or sound particularly attractive, but maybe with a little bit of some clever finessing, we can add some other letters. So here's a suggestion, right? How about instead of STEAM, we use the initials steampunk? And here's how we get there.
In my talks with indigenous populations, there's the belief that all things are interconnected. There's the belief that we always live in an existential crisis, and the only way through it is to have a successful conversation with the environment. Existential crises are not things that we're going to be able to avoid with technology. This kind of sacredness in approaching life and recognizing that it's all an interconnected system of systems, and that our main role is to be stewards and custodians of the environment versus owners of it. So approaching things from that perspective can be applied to space. Like, so far, to the best of my knowledge, we haven't synthesized Western science with indigenous knowledge for space, but that's just a matter of timing, not that there's no way to do it.
So how do we bring more interesting fields into space so that we have a broader understanding of everything that it means to be a spacefaring nation? Yes, at the core of everything, we need our STEM subjects. Always. Science, technology, engineering, and maths are the center of it all. But to expand our understanding, we need to use the arts as well. Music, poetry, film, engage our creative side. But there's more to space than just those things. It's clear that politics plays an integral role in space too. So that needs to be somewhere in our acronym. So hear me out. We keep the STEAM that we all know and love. We add politics into the mix. The next letter, I think, could be for user experience. So there is a whole field called UX. The way that we can apply that to space is thinking about human-centered design, accessibility, and how we design things for humans. And I'm not just talking about human spaceflight here. I'm talking about getting people to understand things and have knowledge available to them in a format that they can access and digest. So UX should be part of our understanding of space. The next letter could be narrative. We know that space is a bit of a bubble at the moment, certainly on the commercial side of things. The infrastructure that powers our entire world is sort of hidden away by design. But if we want people to care about what's going on up there and engage with sometimes complex and seemingly faraway topics, we need to tell a good story. So narrative as maybe another important element to add to the mix. And lastly, because I was battling to come up with something that began with the letter K, We're going with a C. So this is steampunk with a C and ending on the concept of cosmology, which is distinct from the other ones we've spoken about before. But I think what's really vital is that we need to include philosophy, ethics, morality, and indigenous forms of knowledge in how we approach space. And so I'm trying to encapsulate all of that under cosmology, which is the study of the universe's origin, structure, and the cultural interpretations that we have made as humans for as long as we've been looking up at the stars. This is my proposal. We need more steampunk when it comes to thinking about space. There's more to come from Space Plus, so please make sure you're subscribed, stay tuned, comment, share these posts with your friends. Email me if you have any ideas for what you'd like me to cover. I want to make sure this content is relevant and interesting and answering your questions. So tell me, who should I speak to next? What kind of angles would you like me to cover? Do we need to go back to doing some very basic explainers around some of the topics we've covered here? Which other guests would you like to hear from? And if you'd like to collaborate with me, if you're somebody else who works in the sector and is also trying to produce space content to get people to care, get in touch. Love to work with you as well. Thank you so much to everybody that has supported me and this little journey so far. You know who you are, and we'll see what comes next.